Voila. All right, Restream is getting the signal. Let's check Facebook. Refresh. Facebook now shows the stream. YouTube.
I'm looking at the event page. How do I actually access the feed?
Just go to the my personal Facebook.
Okay. Seems like the event page should have the link.
It does, but it's in the discussion or the about. And it just feeds you right back to, most likely, back to the main Facebook page and also to the YouTube. The YouTube seems to be the most reliable one. Let's see, let's get the Twitch one going. Twitch is live. All right. So we are live on 3 streaming platforms. We got Zoom coming in with you, so we can see you during our guest chats. You can't see me because we've only once got Zoom and OBS to share the same video stream. Otherwise, it freaks out. Shares the same audio fine.
I should turn on Do Not Disturb.
Then I have my mug of beer in my sippy cup because you don't want to have any open container in the studio. All right, check in on the iPhone. iPhone shows us in prep. Laptop is muted.
We are live.
Phone is muted. Monitoring on both. All right. Oh, yeah, this setup's pretty cool, but it definitely is not something for. It's not for a novice. Every week, the operating system, the application, the files, the monitor setting, all decide that they should have different settings. And I have to go into each one of them and find what's causing things not to work. And sometimes they're all set correctly. I have to shut down the application, reboot the application, they start working again. So it's a little of a twitchy beast with a lot of components. And working with OBS to get the slides together, even in their kind of crude PowerPoint state, is still about 6 to 12 hours, depending on the show. So I'd like to get that down eventually to 3 to 4 hours. Next week, Joe Price will be on, and so he's putting together some of his poems and digging through his collection. I think with you and Dan, there's just so much material that I wanted to make sure got in.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to switch over
It
to...
is very frustrating listening to those old recordings and thinking about how much better I could do them now.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing of the last 10 years where I've archived everything and reworked everything and remastered and released, and it's mind-blowing how easy it is to produce now. And having all this stuff on all these different formats and digitizing them and then having servers die, and it's like this whole, I'd say like 80% of my world that a 15-year-old right now never has to think about. It's, starting new. This is what Eric's going through with Apple because he started back in the 90s and he'd programmed everything in Carbon and da-da-da-da-da. And then he kept wanting to add features as the years went by. And he should have cut off those product lines maybe a couple of years ago and said, hey, everybody, they're dead. And gone and built the Cocoa version. But he had started building the Cocoa version a couple of years in advance, thinking, oh, it'll only take me a couple of years to do this. It's going to take him 5 years end to end to reprogram the new versions for Cocoa. So explaining that to customers every day is a fun gig.
Oh, God.
But this episode is directly tied to me doing that because there's a moment in our story that we're going to go through here that opened that door. And I think every day I wake up and I think about something because of that moment. And,
Right.
and each
Yeah,
one of
we talked about that at BJ's party.
yeah, and each one of these episodes is doing that. It's putting everything in context and showing the threads and how they interconnect. I don't know if you ever watched James Burke's Connections. It was a British show that ran on PBS where he talked about scientific development.
Yeah.
And he did a narrative Y with acting and visuals, and so I'm kind of taking that approach to these episodes. Originally, a friend of mine wanted me to just get on and sing songs every week. And I'm like, I think that's going to get old. And my voice kept cutting out. So something about how I hold my neck in here working on the computer, or something about the heat, I thought. But then again, we have pollen that is in the air like snowdrifts.
And what part of the state are you in?
I'm just about 15, 20 minutes drive north of downtown Seattle. So
yeah, everybody keeps asking me with my new gig, are you going to relocate? Are you going to relocate? I'm like, well, if they need me to, yeah. But right now, they're not even planning on opening the offices till October. And,
got it.
when they do, it's going to be kind of gnarly. Like, they don't want everybody using multiple people in conference rooms. So everybody's going to be having meetings from their desk. And of course, it's an open cube farm. So they'd have to give me a damn good reason. Never mind all the masks and temperature taking and all that stuff. Just I don't know. By that time, we will have gotten it so dialed working from home that I don't know. Either I'll relocate or I won't.
Well, if you like cooler temperatures, this is the place to be. I think today it's about 60.
Well, yeah, I do. So, yeah, I have this. I have these 3 containers with cassettes. That's after the purge, where I filled up a residential trash can 2/3 full with cassettes, and I still have 1 container of my own recordings, and then 1 of some old mixes I really like that I've got to figure out, what the songs are, so I can replicate those. And then some really, really hard to find stuff like the Liquid Sky soundtrack. And I can't wait to record that for Gray, because God bless him, he was a Residence fan he's been a Residence fan for like 2.5, 3 years. And he only just turned 18 a couple of days ago, which I didn't plan it that way, but sort of happened.
I know that got released on CD at some point. There might be copies floating around out there. I had the vinyl, the book, and VHS, and that all went when I got rid of my vinyl and all my other kinds of media.
Yeah, and so I think he'll really like that quirky soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. It is very Residence.
It is, and it's just a weird cult movie, poorly made. He's gonna like it.
I have the main theme now going through my head. Yeah. They did that at the library in New York. There was one of the public libraries had a recording studio where people would go and work on electronic music, and that's how they got that done on a shoestring.
Okay. So, but yeah, it's just listening to those old recordings is so frustrating. The tyranny of the bounce track. That was something I wanted to actually talk about on this, if there's time, because recordings is so frustrating. The tyranny of track bouncing. Mm-hmm. How I admired people who could fearlessly bounce their tracks, knowing that they only have 1 level of undo.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of hearing folks talk about the late 60s and Sgt. Pepper's and the White Album when they really started putting multi-tracks to use. I don't know if you've watched the documentary series. There's a professor that he does like a movie on every Beatles album. And he pulls it apart and shows you how they bounced and how they layered. And you really had to already in your head have decided what the degradation was going to be.
Right.
And mix that stem, knowing that you're going to mix it with another stem.
Yep.
On the tape, and then how that was going to blend in with the next layers you're going to put on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and I think back to all these recordings, like early Eurythmics recordings being made on a 4-track, and, you know, they're all perfect. You know, just like, screw you, Dave. And,
well, I think it was it an OMD documentary? It was Tears for Fears. I can't remember. I think it was OMD. Because both guys did sing, but the one guy, you know, the early stuff was more new wavy and bippity boppy and up tempo, and then they did a kind of more romantic piece, and that was the big hit. So in the documentary, they turn off all the effects and doubling, and you just hear this guy with a weak voice singing woefully out of tune.
Right.
And I mean, you're like, oh my God, it's horrible. And they're like, that's what went out on the radio. We just added this another line, 2 more lines, and we put this effect on it and this little chorusing effect, and it was like a top 10 hit in Britain. And oh my God, I've been trying to get all this good pitch and stuff on my recordings, and they didn't care about that.
Well, one of my big things last year was collecting live remixes. Oh, hi, Roberta. Collecting multi-track mixes. And the crowning jewel was Bohemian Rhapsody, where I got 24 individual tracks. And listening to that is super illuminating because, you know, you think of it as like this precision, like Donald Fagen level of microsurgery, and it's really not. Likewise, the multi-track of Golden Years, there's, you know, like that descending run, you know, you think of these beautiful, smooth Bowie vocals, and then you listen to them soloed and with, you know, even with effects, just listening to it solo, you hear it just sort of collapse under its own weight. It's like, oh, it's like, God, if I was in the studio, I'd be like, yeah, that's great, Dave. Can we get another take?
And he was famous for not wanting to do more than 1 or 2 takes and letting the producer just like, producer, you figure it out.
Yeah. And, you know, you've got this classic song that sounds immaculate. But, yeah, you solo those tracks and, you know, it's like all the bodies rising from the cemetery. You've got these horrible zombie-like vocals. Oh, no.
Yeah, when you strip away the production, you listen to raw material, it's really enlightening about how much and how strong of a role the producer plays in creating those great hits. And it's layers of a cake that ends up with the final goal, and that producer is the person who has enough vision and understanding to get it there. We are at 5 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and start our opening music.
Bring us live.
And we've got, let's see, in the stream chat, Amber's here, Frank's here. Folks, if you're just dialing in, go ahead and type in the chat under the streaming on either Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, and it should all come into one inbox here, and I can see that. And it'll also display on screen, as you can see, right on this left-hand side. For now, it's 5 o'clock. Start the music. Paralyzed by fear, I'm clutching you so tight, afraid to lose. I retreat more each night. my voice. I've muted myself, and in my shyness, it's you I repel. I will find my way to express my voice. I must find my way to ignite my spark. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. The fractures between us rise into view. I cling to the scraps of the care that falls through. Where is my strength? I've crumbled apart, hiding from the truth. I've shattered my heart, but I will find my way to regain my strength. I must find my way to restore my will. Find a way to me so we can be we. Find my way. Here is this moment to take a chance, to go on alone or grow and advance. I will find my way to express my voice. I must find my way to ignite my spark. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. I will find my way to regain my strength. I must find my way to restore my will. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. Find my way. I'll find my way. Happy Sunday, everyone. Hope you're finding your way out there in the world and staying safe under these situations and these challenging times. I can see Amber's joined. Thank you, Amber, for being a regular viewer. Greatly appreciated it. And Frank, you've been a stalwart. I've greatly appreciated it. I have not caught your most recent streams. I got buried in helping a friend rebuild a website, but I will definitely be at your next show. Just ping me on Facebook. Hey, Joe, longtime friend and viewer and supporter. Great to see you here. I hear that Roberta's out there, but she's being shy on the chat. So join in. Feel free to say hello on the chat in Facebook, the YouTube stream, or on Twitter. Today's guest is Mike Jennings. And, you know, with all my previous shows, I've given everybody 3 lines, 3 descriptors. So with Mike, I've decided technologist, influencer, and creative. For folks that have known me for a long time, you know, I've been into the dress up and funny costumes thing all my life. And that all really got started in doing some school acting and plays, but took off publicly when I joined the Doctor Who fan club in San Jose, California, and became a part of a group that was called The Elite. This was a group of folks who were a little older than me who actually had a lot of hardware and gear and income and were building replicas of items from the show, and we would do big theatrical reenactments on Channel 54 during the pledge drives and also on stage at conventions. These conventions were really kind of strange underground, few geeks getting together. I didn't know that Comic-Con had become a thing until I was quite later in life, and all of a sudden some very straight-laced people said they're going to Comic-Con. I thought that was very strange. You don't seem like Comic-Con people. And little did I know it had become like the Hollywood event. But back in the day, it was just some friends getting together and wearing costumes from the show and having a fantastic time. So that was one of the early groups that I belonged to. And in high school, we had an interview 3 weeks ago with Ed Thomas Keller. Met him singing choir in high school. And one day, if you watched the episode, he turned around and called me a name called Turnstile and said, "You are a member of the Order of the Royal Budgie Empire." And this was a group of some creative like minds in high school and multiple schools around San Jose, California. And one day, I was told, "We're having an initiation. Come over to my friend's apartment. We will watch Monty Python and drink Coca-Cola." And there, one of the initiates was no other than Mike Jennings. So that's how I first met Mike, was through the Budgies. And from that moment on, he has played a pivotal role at key moments in my life, opening doors when I hit a wall. Hey, Mike, welcome to Sunday Live. I'm not hearing you. Oh, okay, great. Okay, great, good. As folks that are regular to the show, they know that the gremlins of sound frequent this space. Edward's episode, we could not hear him. We tested twice in the days before the show and hours before the show, and right when the show happened, couldn't hear him. So I had to interpret everything he was saying. I could hear him, but nobody else could hear him. So I would interpret what he was saying, and folks would be like, "Oh, that's really great." And then he would mouth to me, "That's not what I meant." And so we had great fun with that. He'll be coming back in a later episode so that we can talk more about all that. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, it talks a lot about the Budgies and choir and working in music and his move to England and raising a family there. So as I said earlier, you and I first got introduced in some apartment. I don't even know whose it was. And I was introduced. Oh, it was Happy Keller's. Okay, so Ed's brother, Happy. And I was introduced to you and Paige at that same event. Yeah. I think that's I think that the Budgies was that for a lot of people. Ed was very, he was like, "Oh, the Budgies was not a big deal." And I'm like, "Oh, no, it became a big deal for a lot of people because we all grew up in that sort of sterile, designed in the 50s, Americana suburbia, and suddenly you're surrounded by creative people who played instruments and made art and thought in different ways and watched unusual shows."
Stunning Laserdisc collection. And just talking to him, he was a lot older than I was, and talking to him was super interesting. Ed carried himself like a rock star, and so you had these personalities just to start with, and then it turned out everybody had these uniquely interesting personalities, and that sort of salon environment would be something that would inform every social effort I made pretty much from then on. You think about my garage and you think about Biohazard and all the creative communities that I like to cultivate. And they were all modeled after getting a bunch of creative people in the same room and introducing them and then just getting the hell out of the way.
Now, it looked like I had you muted. the first few sentences we have. We got some comments. Thank you, everybody, for giving me the heads up. That was not a technological failure. That was a pilot error, as they say. I have now unmuted Mike, and it looks like everybody says it's sounding good now. So what you might have missed was Mike was talking about his first experience meeting the budgies and being indoctrinated in that group. Could you just rephrase that, what your experience was being in the apartment?
Well, it was one of those situations where, coming out of suburban hell and, where everybody's striving to be the same and getting plopped into a room full of creative people, like, how did I get here? Why do I get to hang out with these like rock star types, or super unusual people? And, and then finding out that everybody kind of felt the same way, informed every social effort that I made from then on, from the salon environment, if you will. It was the garage and the biohazard, and pretty much everything was all about getting creative people and an unusual mix of people into the same place at the same time, and then just getting the hell out of the way. And from that, all kinds of magical things happen. So I'm a huge fan of the creative salon environment.
Yeah, I would say when I was thinking about putting this show together and going through all the pictures and scanning material and giving some context for people, you and I grew up in a suburban model, again, designed like in the 1950s for everybody to have the car, the lawn, the day job, go to the reservoir on the weekend.
Edward Scissorhands, Burbank.
Yes. Yes. And I think Tim Burton responded the same way we did, which was, where is the artist in that? Where is the musician in that? When it's everybody...
Where's the individual?
Yeah, that one still vexes me to this day, because in some ways the suburb is set up the individual, because at least the spot I grew up with, every household was different on the block, a different ethnic group, different economic group. They were all the people who just made it into the working class to lower middle class. So there was more of a melting pot. When you got a little further to your side of town, that became, I think, a little more standardized.
Yeah, it was very upper middle class, as samey as possible. And, if you weren't all samey, then, there was clearly something wrong with you. Something a little off about that boy.
And so, because I had started choir in 4th grade and kept in with choir, that then made me have a space where I met people. Also, I had bought a copy of Dungeons and Dragons Basic Edition, blah, 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 and started having Dungeons and Dragons groups. And between those two, I started attracting some of those different people. Rob Hillard, who we both know, it was a pure case of, I went in the library all the time, and the librarian said, this guy, you guys should know each other because you're here all the time. So little angels like that came and put the puzzle pieces together, and slowly over time, by high school, I did have these different connections.
And so by the time I started getting into music and music creation, I didn't have to look too far to find, because I'm not a very good musician. I can't really play anything to speak of. I play things just well enough to record them and then go and fix them in the recordings. But I didn't have to look too far to find people who would at least gamely put up with my efforts to record them, which is what I actually thought was really exciting.
And that's always a challenge. It's always working, especially the era in which you and I were trying to do our recordings. The technology was not very friendly compared to today.
No, although I gotta say, for years I was frustrated with having to use crappy gear or borrowed gear or just whatever I could get my hands on. The tyranny of the 4-track recording, where, you had to bounce 2 tracks and add in a new element, and then, You basically only had one level of undo, and that was it. And I thought, someday I'm going to have a multi-track system, and then I did, and then I thought, okay, cables are killing me here. Someday I'm going to have a digital system, and all these analog cable problems will go away, and then I get the digital system, and at least with the analog ones, you got some sound. It might have been a little noisy, have a hum, something like that. In digital, you'd have 8 channels on one wire, and if some little software switch wasn't set correctly, you got nothing. System, and so at least with the analog one, digital paradise, and I've got talent standing around waiting for me, and there is absolutely nothing coming through the system whatsoever. And I'm checking all the wires and checking all the cables, and I finally realize it's something in the software. And everybody who worked with me had long learned that the minute Mike says, "Oh, it's time to fling your cans off your head as fast as you can," because by that time I will have turned everything up, and then suddenly everything's working. And yeah, to save your hearing, you just go, "Oh God, there he goes again." And so, that was.
It wasn't just you, my friend.
Yeah, well, it's just troubleshooting. No matter how good the gear is, no matter how good it gets, it just never really gets better. It just sort of changes. The good news is when you got a studio, after a while, maybe you have people for that. You have, maintenance guys. If you're running a professional studio, you've got maintenance guys who make sure that, all that stuff is sorted out before you even walk in the room.
I would say
problems are still there.
I'd say that's probably getting rarer and rarer. The world and how we had to operate in it is more and more of how the world is today, which is everybody is trying to wear multiple hats at the same time and to play multiple roles and careers in parallel. And the studio stuff that I see is exactly that. And I agree with you. The technology is like, to do this show, it takes about 8 to 12 hours to put together the material for the show and set up everything. And it usually takes about an hour. I've got it down to an hour. It was taking 4 hours to get the technology to work. And now it's got it down to about an hour to get everything to work. And I know the 6 things to check each week because I know they're going to go wrong. So even like the error I had in the beginning where it was, oh, I forgot to unmute him on that particular screen. Everything's complicated enough, unreliable enough that you don't have that sense of, oh, I live in this great shiny future where there's no problems.
Click go.
Yeah, what we were kind of promised. Although I find a younger crowd, a lot of my workflows are based on older workflows, and a lot of younger crowds go, I don't have those problems. And I watch them, and it's because they're like, okay, TikTok, boom, it worked. So their expectation of what they're going to get out of the content generation is, a 30-second
they're
video.
dancing down the happy path, right? These systems are just designed to kind of guide everybody down the regular path. But then when you try to do innovations, that's when, everything still falls apart just the same way it always has. Like, that time I tried to mix one of your shows live while being on stage. That's not the conventional way to do it. There's good reasons for that, and it didn't work. But it was an interesting experiment, and at the time, I hadn't seen anyone do that before. And there were some good things about it, and there were some bad things about it. And, if I'd worked on it for a little while, I could have made that my happy path and gotten that all stable. But, that's the thing. If you are, led through the process on rails like Autopia at Disneyland, then yeah, nothing's going to go wrong, even if you bang into the guy in front of you.
I'm helping a friend with his software company, and I see this all the time where if you're sticking to the straight and narrow, and I tested software a lot during the 90s for Apple and other companies. And like you said, if you stuck to the path, okay. And the testing happens along the path. Therefore, everybody knows what's going on in the path and got it to fix. But as soon as you get to the fringe edge of something, it hasn't been looked at as much. Suddenly, the fringe edge transfers into somebody else's territory. For example, if you're running a program, you're on an operating system. There may be a bug in the operating system, and the developers of the applications can't do a lot about it, and vice versa. So I see the music and art creative software, same thing, and that parallels culture, which you were talking about in the beginning, which is there's this sort of main flow of the river, and if you're streaming along in your inner tube, you're going to be just fine. But as soon as you roll over the banks, you start getting snagged by twigs and rocks, and it's a whole different experience.
Yeah. Now, when we were starting, there wasn't much of a lazy river. It was just trying to work like professionals with bad gear, you know, or worse, trying to work like amateurs with good gear. You know, some of those nights in San Jose State.
I've done both.
San Jose State's music building. It was just like, you know, this stuff's really good. Why isn't this sounding good? I mean, how many years was it before I even figured out what mastering was? I'm just like, I don't get it. Why does this thing sound so great here, but then I play the tape of the mix down in the car and it just falls apart? You know, what is the difference between my recordings and, you know, these commercial recordings? And I'd be looking at the liner notes. Well, there's mastered by Bob Ludwig at Masterdisc. Well, I thought he just like put together the running order and got the package together. You know, I had no idea at the time it had anything to do with the actual sound until, you know, we were working together in Saratoga.
Yeah, that was my impression too. Even in Dan's classes, he never mentioned mastering. Mastering was something you did after the fact during the release process. And I was always told it was ordering and trimming and blah, blah, blah. And I never heard during the 80s and maybe even a lot of the 90s that mastering affected sound quality. Oh, they might come up in level volume a little bit. But now, with what I know about mastering, completely make or break a recording.
Yeah, I actually just remembered it was Chris Meyer, this guy who does a lot of, training content for using analog synthesizers these days. He was the one who answered me plainly. I said, you know, I was bitching about that same thing. Oh, what is the difference between my recordings and a commercial recording? He goes, oh, mastering. Duh, you know, and I'm like, oh, I guess I better look into that.
It's a secret. It's like everybody's heard, if you're into music and collecting albums, oh, this one was remastered, therefore it must be better. And that's really the first time I noticed the term mastered. It's like, oh, remastered, that's better. And 24-bit master, that's got to be better. And all that stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, along this path, you've been talking about working with music and the technology. I want to take you back a bit. Here's how we first met. And we got a picture of a birthday party of a friend of mine.
A photo, aren't you?
So I know three of the people in that photo might be here. I know, let's see, one person in this photo. No, two of them are here. Maybe three. And this was, I think, for me, where it really started. It was the Budgies, and then we connected, and then somehow we all, without cell phones, stayed connected and started going to each other's parties and meeting each other's friends. So my Beatles fandom, my Budgies friends, my science fiction friends, the Mike Jennings world, we're all starting to meet and hang out in different locations.
That goes back to that salon thing, because you take all these people with very different circles and very different worldviews and put them together like one of those Chinese magic ring things, that sort of thing happens, because I'm looking at this and yeah, there's, biohazard, there's, my house, there's my garage, there's my grandmother's house right there. Um, and, these were all interesting environments to pull in a lot of people and kind of get them going together. And yeah, it ended up building into this kind of giant morass that didn't really have much definition, did it?
No, and I'll correct you. There's no biohazard in this set yet.
Really? Those
You got your grandmother's? This is my friend Shelley's house. You guys all showed up to her birthday party without her. I invited everybody, and so we hadn't even gotten that far. But the last picture there is the garage, because everybody, you created with the garage a space that everybody from all these different scenes started realizing it's there, it's unlocked, and I can just go in. And people did, which blew my mind growing up in a more working class environment where you locked everything down.
Yeah. Yeah, and we maintained that through the, for those of you who are listening who don't know, Biohazard was a house downtown that, it was a crappy house, hence the name. Perfect little, first house out of mom's house sort of environment, but it was decorated very much like the garage you see in the pictures here, with posters everywhere, and there was always something somebody could relate to, and so it was easy to get conversations going. And yeah, I left the doors unlocked, and people were coming and going at all hours, and while that was very trying on me and every single one of my girlfriends, it did definitely foster a terrific environment for creativity where everybody was jumping off of each other and ending up doing cool things.
And you definitely brought to Biohazard everything that the garage had. And then by being downtown San Jose, which was really a run-down, abandoned area of the city at the time, it suddenly gave everybody more permission. It wasn't a suburban house where your mom might walk in, or it's in a suburban neighborhood where people are looking at you at askance. It was in this poor area of town that was run down and semi-abandoned, so people felt free, whoever they were, to come on by.
Yeah, it had nothing in common with the buttoned down, aesthetic that so many of the families around here were striving for at the time. And that was very, very deliberate. That was almost surgically planned. We would sit there and have literal meetings on how to create that sort of situation.
Yeah, and in the pictures here, I threw in some of the stuff that was ancillary, some of the parties that were going at Biohazard, some pictures of Biohazard, a couple which convey that it was potentially a biohazard, not just a name. The picture of the backyard with Lawrence and the front area. And then you see gatherings of people at parties. There's Lawrence. From the hanging bed, he took the hanging chair that we had for parties, and that you had strung a bunch of bungee cords up into the tree, and people would bounce on this chair and spin on it. And I guess one day Lawrence decided to do a photo shoot, and he tied a bed to it, and there's him there being his David Bowie self. And I also added in here pictures of laser tag, because I had started playing with the Doctor Who group, this tag with these small rubber bullets, and then laser tag came out, and everybody converted to laser tag. And at some point, I think multiple people brought laser tag into Biohazard, and that's how that started. Do you remember?
Yeah, that was mostly me. But I think BJ and Chris Hudak also had a lot to do with that. Or at least BJ.
So BJ, and me already had that laser tag gear.
Now the other thing, the other element that was very deliberate was the costume parties and things like that. There was a lot a lot of stuff that came out of conventions. One thing I had noticed in conventions, of course, is that when people are in costume, they feel free to do things that they would not allow themselves to do under normal circumstances. And so the costume parties were always designed to create a situation where people were released from being who they thought they were, to the point where, well, if we'd take one of your old weather balloons and string it across the front door and slit it down the middle so that people had to basically, enter the house through a giant vagina, to be born again, and and then create other situations where they had to kind of disconnect from whatever behavior they thought they had to have. And so there would be costume requirements, or there would be, you're not allowed to feed yourself. You have to get somebody else to feed you all the finger food we had around and things like that. And once people got disconnected from that, they got really, it was really addictive. People would feel that they needed to do that from time to time, but only at the parties. What do you have in the next party? What do you have in the next party? And, I kept wanting to say, hey, I kind of showed you how to be something else. Just go do that, But they needed that safe place.
Yeah. And that will be a running theme through this whole episode. You mentioned the costumes and whatnot. And in here, there are also some photos of the Doctor Who conventions that would happen downtown San Jose. And I had a bunch of different crowds. So I had, my biohazard friends. I had my university friends. I had the budgies still kind of floating around. I had this Doctor Who group, been around doing acting. And when I was digging into these photos, I was amazed how almost every single one of those groups at some point came to Biohazard or into the collection of people that came after the official Biohazard location, such as the laser tag in the woods at someone else's house, or here there are a couple people from that Doctor Who acting troupe that ended up going to Biohazard. And then I also included some pictures here where a lot of the time at Biohazard, it was a party. It was a place where people can come and be themselves and share ideas. And there was all this creativity around, but it still, for me, wasn't busting out of the conventional. It wasn't like I was suddenly at the factory and people were shooting films and writing albums. I wasn't seeing the actual artist work coming out of the space. So I know several times I try to push it that way, and people are kind of like, "You're spoiling the party. We're having fun here with take your performance art elsewhere." And so there was that challenge where I realized the fandom of the Doctor Who fandom or goth fandom or whatnot, there was this fandom element. So a couple pictures here, we're sitting around all talking. There's Craig and then you in the middle of the room. And I remember that night because I was like, I'm tired of talking philosophy and talking about art. I want to go do it. And I had a pocket recorder and we all got out, and there's a picture of Lawrence and Chris. We got out to the train tracks.
Yeah, to the train tracks. Yeah, we had this area up by a military contractor and some train tracks in downtown San Jose that had some very unique acoustic properties combined with a lot of very strange debris laying around, giant shipping containers and, big metal spools that held God knows what originally. And, for industrial music enthusiasts, this was perfect. And, he got us all out there and got us making music and recording the music, and it was fantastic.
Some of the early Audio Terrace stuff was me in high school with my friend George, an earlier picture of us on the choir tour bus, where we just call each other, like his phone broke, so we'd call him and recite different ideas that he had, and I'd record those, and all those early recordings were compilations of that. And by Biohazard, that's I think around the second album, and the train track metal whacking first went out on that second album. And I love that idea of a collective, of a collection. I've always seen myself, mainly Audio Terrace has become more of a band with me as a lead singer songwriter, but it still has that element of a collection, of collaboration, of different people throwing in different stuff. And the early recordings definitely reflected that impulse. It was like I felt like I was in a pressure cooker of suburbia, and I didn't, like you said, I didn't have the musicianship. I couldn't play guitar or piano, much like you, but I had that drive. And if I could set up a situation where we could bust out, that was the best.
Yeah. Yeah, you can play the piano. You play that damn Dirge the Heart over and over.
Oh yeah, well, the one song I've shelved from re-releases. Yeah, there's a 2008 version that I started and never finished, but yeah, it's still kicking around out there. It might come out as a Kalib solo thing, maybe make it a little more honky tonk or something. So these things come back around. Yeah, so that whole community came all together and came around and was happening. And I want to shout out to Ariel, who's on the chat. Yes, that is a picture of you at the Renaissance Fair, because the Renaissance Fair was another crowd that had tie-ins, whether it was Ariel, whether it was Deirdre. It was like any place where people could bust out and dress up and be different, all were gathering around each other with that common theme. And so I see this as a pivotal moment. And I put these pictures of me in there because when I look at me, I'm like, oh, I was the holdout. I've got a button-up shirt. It's tucked in. I'm in the jeans. I'm looking pretty conventional compared to everybody else. And as fans who have followed me over the years know, I became very unconventional in my appearance in the 90s. And yeah. I think at Biohazard, I hadn't let go yet, which surprised me.
Yeah, that might be. But actually used that a couple of times because, I'd be talking to people and they go, well, who's that guy? Because you look like the weirdo because you seemed pretty comparatively nondescript. And I go, yeah, that's the guy you'd want to watch out for, And they go, really? And I go, yeah, I mean, he's the one who holds this all together, right? And they go, oh. And, I like to keep everybody guessing about everybody because as soon as everybody came to conclusions, that was kind of, it's a conclusion, the end, literally. And so, and and then that would come up, again and again, not just with you, like Dave Gustafaro was an incredibly creative, talented musician and singer, friend of mine. And to look at him, you'd never know. And then he would start belting out something and, would knock your socks off. And so, yeah, people would ask him, oh, yeah, that guy is actually the weirdest dude in this room. I promise you, and I meant it.
And I believe it. I agree that Dave was one of those people that wore button-up shirts, I think, and
yeah,
wasn't even part of the San Jose T-shirt crowd. He was like a little more formal, and but probably one of the oddest people.
The most
that
original and
group.
Creative and unconventional. He was completely unbound by conventional thinking.
Is this story true? I know I spooked your mom a couple times, one with a mannequin and one when I was trying to spook you. And I told you about it, and you said, oh, you got nothing on Dave. He laid underneath my mom's car until she drove away to freak her out. Is that true? Did that happen?
I cannot recall, but it is very possible. He would do experiments on people, and they were grand experiments. Like, he once attended a Christian camp for a week because he wanted to see. He had a theory that if you went to a place like that, anything you said through a smile would be completely accepted, you know. And when he got back, he was just, you know, listing off the crazy shit he said through this kind of vapid, warm Christian smile from a camp full of born again Christians. That, you know, something about that environment made those things acceptable that under any other circumstance, you know, would have started a file with the FBI on him or something.
This is, I think, another strong running theme of the creative impulse in the suburban environment is that was the canvas to paint on, whether it was your social group, your family's religious groups, and whatnot. Those were the only canvases to throw anything against. There wasn't a warehouse district to go and experiment in. There wasn't this. So you experimented not just visually with like photography or music, but you did performance art as a part of your everyday life.
Yeah. Well, I thought that's what you were supposed to do if you were going to be an artist and creative type.
That a lot of people I still don't know about performance art, even though, you know, it's been around for decades, and if not all of humankind's history. If you just go watch the film Man on the Moon to get a taste of performance art there.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to double check here. Let's see. The chat group.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that story. I think it is true.
On Dave.
Because, yeah, the only thing that made me wonder if it's true or not is, was he skinny enough? And I think he was.
I think we all were.
Yeah.
I think we all were skinny.
I think at the time she was driving that Monte Carlo, and so I think he could have gotten under there. And at the time, it was like, ha ha ha, Dave, that nut, you know. But
now you're like,
those kind of memories didn't always stick with me.
Yeah, yeah, and some of the things that people did at the time to us seemed very artistic and creative, and only years later do we realize that there was something else going on. I had some pictures of the studio, recording studio. If folks didn't watch the Dan Wyman episodes, check them out. But I wanted to quickly show you this recording studio that was downtown San Jose. And Anita's in one picture here. It's funny how she appears over the decades and the different spaces. She has like these guest appearances. So when Biohazard was happening, I was in here recording material and recorded material for some years. So that was another angle. And sometimes I don't think too many people crossed over into my San Jose State life from Biohazard, but some did. And then one other note that you might not know about was to finish paying for grad school. The mother of your daughter got me a job at the San Jose Mercury News.
Oh, yeah.
So that was another connection in all this chain. And we'll get back to Biohazard in the social group, but I just want to personally thank you for all the moments you stepped in and saved my tush in my scholastic career. I hadn't realized how much of a role you played in that until I went through and scanned all these pictures and said, oh, that's right, Mike did that. All right, Mike did that. So not only because I met you, I then met someone who got me a job with my long hair so that I could fund going to school. But in the garage picture back there, I would come over, and if folks don't know, I was diagnosed in 1991 as being dyslexic and attention deficit disorder and hyperactive. No surprise to people that knew me, but it was a surprise to me. And somehow I'd gotten myself into a local university, got myself through high school with this, and I couldn't write a paragraph to save my life. So I'd get these writing assignments, and I could talk it, but I couldn't write it. And I would crawl over to Mike's into his garage, and he had this thing called a computer that I didn't know anybody else that had a word processor. And I would just verbally all my ideas and concept, and he would type it up for me. And ask me questions. Well, do you mean this? And da 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 da. And
Yeah. And
yeah,
rearrange it.
that
Yeah.
that was huge.
Well, I gotta tell you, that, yeah, that was really big, and I knew that I was doing you a solid, but you did me a solid too, because I thought I wanted to go into philosophy until I helped you with your philosophy papers. And I thought, bullet dodged.
First you believe this, then you create the contrary, then you take the contrary and analyze and take your response that's contrary to that, and then do the complementary and all these. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was torture.
I was offered to write the after those papers that you helped me write. I was offered to write the charter for the philosophy department of San Jose State University. I kid you not. And the professor took me out to the parking lot and said, you really need to focus and drop all this other stuff you're doing. Just do the philosophy thing. And, you can co-write the charter. And I said, thank you so much, sir. It's called multimedia. That's what I'm doing. And I'm not going to be doing philosophy charter. And so, yeah, I also, it was good. It really helped frame things for me for my psychology degree.
Thinking, man, this Duart kid, he can write.
Probably true. I don't think I have any of those papers to verify whether or not they were anything great or how they ended up. I just got them in, got by.
So between the two of us, we made them pretty good.
Yeah. And if anything,
I realized, once the first time you came over and said, hey, or you were describing a problem you were having with getting the stuff on. So, well, let's try it on the computer, because then you can go as fast as you want and then go back and rearrange everything. And you said, oh, that sounds good. And then the first time I'm like, man, there has never been a guy alive who needs this sort of, word processor technology. Because of the way you thought and the way you got through sentences at the time, was like, this is never going to work on paper until it's kind of reorganized. And, I remember thinking, should I tell him to write everything on index cards and, whatever. Mm. But then you just came over and I just typed it up and rearranged it because it was just as easy. But yeah, that was just, helping out a friend. But.
Well, I appreciate it. And that got me to the day that I was diagnosed. It was a Disability Awareness Day. And they had all these booths set up so they would blindfold people and take them around campus to see what it felt like to be blind, put earplugs in to see what it was like to be deaf, this sort of thing. And there was a booth where they said, hey, read this piece of paper and write what it says. And I did it. And the guy looked at me really funny. I said, what's the problem? And he said, you read this and then you wrote something about it. I said, yeah, wasn't that what the exercise was? And he goes, it's not readable. It'd been Xeroxed like 100 or 200 times, so the characters were all broken up. And my brain is so compensated, I was able to fit all these lines into text and read it. And he's like, there's something going on. So I went in, got tested, and sat down with the administrator afterwards. And then she said, yeah, this has been a tough road for you because you've got all these disabilities. This here, da, 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 da. The good news is they just passed a law that and we're in a state school and we have to help you and retrain you. And so there was all this crazy software I used for about a year and learning how to restructure my sentences and how to restructure how I read. And it was a huge move forward. So you opened a door that got me into the next door that led to the next door.
That's a bonus one I hadn't heard.
Yeah, there's a lot of going through this the last 2 days and looking at these pieces and thinking about the context of this conversation, where that was the theme, a moment in which you hit a wall and there's someone there with a tool that puts a door in that wall. And you've done that repeatedly.
Right. Wow. See, a lot of the things that I keep hearing about people, that people tie things back to me, and it's like, a lot of it's like, well, I set up the environment so that would happen. that was like this machine I, built and switched on, and these people got together. Yeah, I ended up marrying, or whatever, or lost my virginity, or all those things. I didn't really participate directly, and I created the
Hopefully
environment
not the latter.
for. And so yeah, and so uh, and so I don't really think about it all that much because I didn't so much do it.
No, I think
But
I think you had
when
both
it gets
going
into
on.
this really personal stuff, it is a little startling.
Well, I think you set up environments, that salon that you talked about. You had resources other people didn't have. And so people would seek you out for engaging with those resources, whether or not it was direct, like you typing up my papers and sitting with me and coaching me through that whole process, or whether or not you just had it in the corner and then people interacted with, and you could observe them interacting with that and go, let's set something else up in that other corner and see what happens over there. There was definitely times in which you actively participated and the document writing was one of them. And we're going to cover a couple others. And I think this episode I thought was going to be easier than doing the Dan episodes because there was so much material there. I'd say this is on par with the amount of material. So, folks, as usual, if Mike can, we'll have him stick around over time. Officially, we wrap up at 6 o'clock, which is only 7 minutes. And I think we're halfway through the material. And if you can stick around a little longer, I'd love to touch on that stuff too.
A little.
Okay. So before we do that, you mentioned Dave, and you mentioned working with Dave musically, and you wrote a song with Dave. Or did Dave write the lyrics and the vocals, and you wrote the music? How did that work?
Dave's pattern was, I would noodle along and I would create something that was kind of interesting. And then Dave would come in and write amazing lyrics and generally awesome vocals for it after the music
Dave. Or did Dave write the lyrics and the? Sorry, we had a little double stream going on with Facebook. I'm getting reports that YouTube is still streaming. Is that true, folks? I'll pause a moment here. All right, I'm still seeing it on Facebook on my iPhone, so it might have been your local computer that had a glitch. We have had streams cut off, and if I look over at Twitch, it's still happening there. So at least the live stream is going out somewhere. And let me mute YouTube. We had YouTube. We had an episode where we kept going and talking for about 5 minutes, and streams had dropped and come back up. So I don't want to do that. I want to make sure we get the recording. I can always edit it in post, as they say.
Hi, Michelle.
Let's refresh here. So refreshing, YouTube came back up, and let's see what folks in the chat say. Hey, Michelle, good to see you. Roberta, Joe, Ariel. This is awesome. Folks, is it back up on Facebook? Is it still streaming? Michelle Williams just joined.
It never stopped for me.
Michelle, if you just joined, you missed a picture of you earlier at a birthday party at Shelley's. All right. Well, I'm not seeing anybody else saying that Facebook has stopped, so I'm going to assume it's still rolling. And we were just talking about Mike's collaboration with Dave Gustafaro. That's his name? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and Michelle sent a down frown face about her picture. Don't worry, this will restream, be posted on the YouTube link. You can find it in the Facebook event in the Kalib official page on YouTube. It'll get posted up there in a couple hours with the beginning edited to the right start point, and then you can check out any part of the episodes that you missed today or on any other Sunday. So back to Dave.
So yeah, that was the basic routine was I'd noodle around with something and Dave would come in later and make it great.
You would noodle around on the music, or you would noodle around on vocals?
Music. Oh, no. Vocals? Never.
Because over the years, as I started running a small record label and professionally putting out works, one thing that growing up in fandom that changes when you move into the industry is the word song. Growing up, a song was a piece of music I heard. It was a 3-minute piece of music that had lyrics and a neat keyboard part and whatnot. And when you're in the music business, a song is the vocal melody and the lyric. The rest is music. So, for example, David Bowie came, and we were talking about Bowie earlier. Bowie comes in, sits there with a newspaper. Robert Fripp and Tony Visconti and Brian Eno and whatnot all get together and they're jamming and they're creating music. And David puts the newspaper down where he's been reading about a performance artist called Joe and sings the song Joe the Lion. Then he's like, okay, one take, and he goes off to the bar to get a beer. He wrote the song. And the producer produced the music and produced the recording, and the band created a musical arrangement for the song. And that comes out of the historical legal background of how songwriting used to be done, where you had a lyricist who sat down and wrote a vocal melody and wrote lyrics and he had a clever rhyme and blah, 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 and then would hand it off to the composer, and the composer would set that to music. And so there was, all the legal systems are still based on that old model. So once you get to like the Beatles and everything after that, that business model starts getting really fuzzy in the song creation process. But I want to take a moment to play a song you did with Dave, that term song and how things worked with it played a key role in some later stuff I did and our conversation a couple years ago. And here is my Dave Gustafero's song, Your Will.
won't touch me? Why do I kiss the ground you walk on? If your arms won't hold me, why do I kiss the ground you walk on? If your eyes won't see me, why do I bless the air you breathe? If your lips won't kiss me, why do I bless the air you breathe? If you want me to die, why do I love you? If you want me to die, why do I love you? If you want me to die, why do I love you? If you want me to die, why do I love you? If you want me to die anymore.
Let's see. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. That was Your Will. Music by Mike Jennings and song by Dave Gustafaro. They worked on that in the early 90s, and we were talking earlier about the technology that we had available to us. It was pretty crude at the time. The synthesizers, the sequencers, that had all become more robust by that point, but certainly the actual recording tools, whether it was reel-to-reel tape, etc., those were trickier to pull together. Now, that song, Mike did the music, Dave put those vocals on top, the song, the lyrics, and the vocal melody. I heard a version of this, and to be honest, I don't remember all the details, but I heard a version of this, at least the instrumental, and I wrote a song on top, and it was called Branded. And Branded was a much shorter 2-stanza piece, so it was still largely instrumental. And so at that point, I took it in the studio, and I can't remember exactly how it happened with Michael Blakely. And we banged out a version of what Mike had done musically. And having heard Your Will now after all these years, I can hear what we took from the music in Your Will and what didn't. I think the keyboardist was Robert Jasmine from Apple. Michael Blakely did percussion along with me in a 6-pack of beer. And there's some funny moments where we hit the octapad very poorly. This is what an octapad trigger looks like. And this was a studio in Campbell that I was working at, so I had access to it. Little side trivia, Smash Mouth practiced upstairs. So when we were working on this music for this album, we had to tell them to shut up because they were a local punk band at the time. Well, times change. They did some cover tunes and became quite famous. So that version of Branded appears on the Damaged recording that still really is very similar to Mike's Your Will track. And then in the late 90s, that was remixed by Mike Castanelos of San Jose. If anybody knows what happened to him, let me know. I haven't seen him now in almost a decade. And he did a remix, having participated in a show that Mike referred to earlier. And he did a couple other later remixes. And that version diverges further from Mike's composition, but it does still retain that great keyboard solo at the ending. And it's just such a great hook. And then in the early 2000s, the song was set to a whole different set of music. So you still had the Branded song, but completely different parts. And that one lost that keyboard hook. And I see. So Mike, I know you had to step away a moment there. I was telling people about the evolution of Your Will.
Yeah.
I still don't know how I heard it the first time. Like if you played me the instrumental or played me Dave's version, because I didn't realize Dave's topic was the same. Well, it's taken from a different perspective, but it's still the same. You know, his, you know, you don't know if it's abuse, where mine's a little more having fun. Yeah. But it is the same general topic about control, one person control over someone else, and there being something physical to that. And I hadn't remembered that or realized that. And you've got a bunch of parts in there that I don't think is in the version of Branded that I have on the Damage album. Because I know we were doing the octopad and keyboard, all those little pieces in there. I don't know if that ended up in the... So I think the Your Will recording sounds more different than I remembered. And I think you should tidy up that and release it.
Yeah, so I have... What did you just say?
I think it should be tidied up and released.
Oh.
I mean, I did like 15 minutes of mastering on it. I got rid of the tape hiss, pumped up and it came more to life.
All right.
I'm just saying there's a there, and it'd be cool to see it get released.
So for me, my take.
Feel free, speak freely on this. I know all these decades later.
Yeah, it was almost exactly 30 years later. No, I guess, 91, I would say. And listening to it now, I have 3 mix downs on tape. I have 4-track masters, but I no longer have access to the Tascam Porta Studio that I would need to play them back properly to decode the DVX. But the 3 mix downs I have, one of them is strictly instrumental. Another one just has those droning background voices of I Can't Take Anymore. And then the third one includes Dave's vocals on top of all that. And while I love his lyrics for this, and they're just as exciting to me now as they were at the time. I loved, the theme, listening to it. I don't think it's his best vocal, and he came in after the song had already been recorded, and I was pretty happy with the way it was, because it started off with me noodling around on the keyboard and working out a melody and the structure on the keyboard and laying in the drones and all that. And then Howard Busick came in, and I think I went to dinner or something, and I came back and he had just done this smashing percussion line for it, where the keyboards are until the climax at the end, the keyboards are taking care of the rhythms, and the drums are providing the melody effectively. And I thought it was terrific the way it was, and I played it for Dave later on, and he said, well, give me a minute. It goes off, writes a song for it, and we laid it in on top. And the first thing I thought was, well, it kind of doesn't really work with the backing vocals anymore. If I had the track separate, I would probably do this different. And the second thing I thought was, God, Dave, listen to Swans much?
I have a funny story about that.
Hindsight, the hindsight, that's plagued me my whole career. Every time I do something I really like, I record something and I go in and I go, that was great. Now I'm going to listen to some music. I think I'll listen to Gary Newman and realize, shit, I just ripped off Gary Newman or whatever it was.
The funny thing is, it's not in the Branded Industrial on the Damage album, the first album that had a version of this. But in this version, listening to that, there's a kind of thing, and it's totally Newman. I'm like, he has a little Newman in his. I don't have the Newman stuff in mine. Oh, okay. Yeah, there was a lot of those little incidental
pieces. That was before Newman really started using that sound.
You know what? It might be possible, but it was, I don't know.
it was almost concurrent, but yeah.
There was
No,
some
so that
stuff around
happened to me all the
85
time.
I'm thinking about, but
Oh dear. Okay.
then
So
again, I know every little note that he's released. So,
yeah,
um,
and I was, I liked Gary Newman. I was never the fan, you were, but I like Gary Newman a lot. But I found it a little distressing how often my stuff ended up sounding like his,
although
completely
this track,
inadvertently.
I'd say this track has a little element of Newman, a little element of the Swans. Uh, it's a combination of, but it's its own piece. I've spent a lot of
Yeah,
years around the goth industrial world, and I've never heard a piece that sounded exactly like this. It's distinctly a different
right.
band in the same
But
genre. So it doesn't
but Dave
sound
was
like you did a cover
definitely
version.
listening to the Swans at the time, and he was also into Leonard Cohen way before I was, so he might have heard "If It Be Your Will." Um, this one is more of a darker sort of take on the thematic material, but you can imagine because uh, I first heard "Branded" on the Damaged recording, and didn't know that it had evolved into that, and so I was like, wow. And now to hear that you didn't even remember Dave's lyrical motif and you laid in something similar, I find is really astonishing.
I literally when I mastered it yesterday, I'm like, have I ever heard this? I mean, like I think I heard it like once in passing of a vocal, Dave, rah, 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 because I had to have, because my vocals on the first version of Branded is raw, 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 just like his. It's got this raw, lying here on my back. So I had to have ingested what he did. But what I remember is more the I can't take anymore being much more prominent. And like that being a more part of the song, where I thought the instrumental was so solid it didn't need a singer on it. It didn't need a vocal. So
Yeah,
with
no,
Branded, I took it from very minimalist, where it's all atmospheric, and then there's just this moment where the character in the scene turns to you and says a few key phrases about the situation, and then the phrase "all conquerors mark," and you hear the boom, and I think that's where Michael Blakely hit the octopad wrong, because it's like boom. It's not in beat at all, but it's like this boom, and that keyboard part starts. I'm like, it doesn't need anything. It doesn't need anybody talking anything, because that keyboard part is so strong and it's so emotional that it's just this one little concept in the middle to contextualize it. Yeah, so that was my take on
yeah,
it. And then Aaron did the vocals on the Fracture version, so I got a female vocal, and what Mike's arrangement was much more electronic versus industrial. And then I don't know, I don't think the music in the Queer Blue version has anything to do with what came before it, but I could take a look and see if any elements got in there.
yeah. That is one of my favorite of my old recordings, um, for sure, and apparently the first one that ever made it to CD.
through another route. And okay, on the air, I'm gonna say this. I'm sorry if I grabbed the instrumental and put vocals on it and released it without you knowing. And uh, definitely, I
Yeah,
was one of
no,
those
it's all.
artists that it was so hard to make anything happen, and I was doing so many goddamn things. Sorry for my language. So many things between San Jose State and music and that I definitely at times lost track. So,
That's
so
okay.
I'm glad in the end it meant that some aspect of what you created, that at least that keyboard theme that I think is amazing, got out into the world and got released. And I think looking at a comment from Michelle here, she says she's thumbs up on Your Will getting mastered and released, and that she would buy it if you had it available. So
The
And I know it's your
The
favorite
challenge
piece
for
because you've
me,
talked about it over the years.
yeah, it's the thing is, my favorite piece is the one without Dave's vocal,
Hmm.
because as much as I love the lyrics, it's not his best performance. I know what that man is capable of, and I think he would cringe too. Um, but the other thing about Dave is I can never get him to do what I think he should do. Okay, I'm ready. I got the full version. Let's do a recording just like when we did it in the demos. And he just won't. And so I don't know what I would get out of him, even if I could arrange it. But
Mm.
yeah, I like the version that's more spare, because to me, the star of the show, to me, the song is Howard's percussion. Um, it was just so startling and so interesting. And, I didn't know what he was doing. I went to get dinner and he was, poking away at a drum machine, and I wasn't paying much attention. And then when he played it for me, I was like, hey, you made this my song. You made this a song. It's fantastic. And I was like, done. But when Dave says, hey, can I do something? You say yes, right? It's just a general good idea. And so I think it's really compelling. I think it's got a lot of good parts to it. And I suspect my 4-track recording, I could access, well, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, even taking
But anyway, I gotta wrap up, guys.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on the show today. And to quickly check the chat cam.
You gonna play Branded?
No, because Facebook does not like playing anything that's commercially released. So I did it on one show and they chopped the show, and I had trouble with YouTube and I'd go edit. So you're hearing live streaming unreleased material only on Sunday Live. And if you want to hear the released versions, go out there, look up Audio Terrorist Damage for the industrial version that sounds a lot like what Mike released. And then on the Audio Terrorist Fracture album is a later, more electronic version. And if you want to hear what Queer Blue did covering Branded, listen to the Slip Away album. And so I want to just thank you so much for being here and for taking the time for this show. I know it's an investment in not only yourself and all the audience coming on. I do have a whole nother part of an episode already synced up here, and I would love to do that with you at a later date as a part 2. Would that be cool?
Yeah, I could probably work that out.
All right. So we'll find out. I'm going to talk to Joe tomorrow. He's scheduled for next weekend, and find out if he wants to keep that date. Are you also possibly available next weekend? Maybe move him out a week?
Maybe not. We'll talk about it.
Okay. We'll talk offline. And for folks listening in, there's much more to the Mike Jennings and Kalib story, and we look forward to having Mike on a future episode so we can talk about those. Greatly appreciate.
Thank you for having me on and bringing my attention to all those more personal things that I did that materially, opened doors for you. That is good to hear.
Absolutely. And normally by now we've had what I call the mystic moment, where I give a little thought on my life and other people's lives and how folks might learn or have a take home from all of this. And we're going to hold that off for the second episode, but it's exactly that. And there were many more examples to come during the 90s of where you did that. So thank you.
Right.
Stay safe out there. And we'll see everybody next week. Again, this is Mike Jennings, technologist, influencer, and creative on Sunday Live. And we will have him back. If you need to contact me, there is this slide, KalibBandcamp.com, AudioTerroristBandcamp.com, QueerBlueBandcamp.com. You can find me on Facebook all the time, and my YouTube channels. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there. and have a good time.